from the Crypt.
Hello, boils and ghouls. Welcome to a EC Comics review of Tales From The Crypt. My name is Jason. I'll be your host today, and I am joined by Alan Katz. Welcome.
Thank you, Jason. It is always a pleasure to hang with you and to especially review what EC is doing.
Yes, I think this week especially we need a little EC in our lives. We're not going to dive too deep into that intentionally, but the content and context is literally on the page. So we're going to go there, at least to some degree. All right, so today we're talking about Cruel Universe number 4. And I think you've been only on the Epitaphs from the Abyss, the horror line. So we're kind of jumping over to the sci-fi line, which wasn't something that really touched on the Tales from the Crypt show, but was definitely part of the EC legacy and something that they were trying to do with the perversions of science.
But by the same token, we were always working to try to exploit the other comic book titles and genres that EC published. That was part of what the Crypt Partners owned as part of the deal. So we had been working on trying to create. Well, there was the Two-Fisted Tales was part of that output, and Weird World, the backdoor TV movie that we did for Fox was really an attempt to do that. And Perversions of Science was a second bite at that particular apple.
Right. But yeah, it's something harder to do on the budget that you probably had at the time.
Oh, I could tell you stories about that.
Well, that's for another episode.
Indeed, it is.
All right, so we're just going to dive right into this. So again, Cruel Universe number 4. We've got some really fantastic covers as always. I love the little retro ones, the kind of more fantasy splash cover, and again the kind of weirdness of the alien in front of the Capitol and the judge, the Supreme Court, or the Chief Justice. So some great covers on this one as always. All right, we'll dive into our first segment, which is called By the Book, and we're kind of thrown right into a inner city war scenario. There's a huge spaceship that's been crashed. We get there's some soldiers.
Can we call it a hellscape?
Yeah, hellscape, definitely. We get some narration, very apropos, and again, this is the one that they chose to come out the week right after the U.S. Presidential election. So I'm sure this is all very intentional. There's a little narration that starts with the famous Thomas Jefferson quote saying, "The tree of life must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. It is its natural manure." So, saying it right off the bat. So we have a group of soldiers going to investigate. We kind of focus on one named Graydon, who just recently joined up. A lot of these other guys were kind of first wave. They're going to try to infiltrate the spaceship, and then a laser blast disintegrates a large chunk of them, and then we start getting some backstory via narration. 42 years ago, an alien crash landed in the middle of a farm, seeking asylum, very Superman-esque. Then the whole debate happened over whether this literal alien could be granted citizenship and given rights, which eventually it does receive, and eventually runs for president and wins. But then it invites others from its race to come and seek refuge, which causes a war to break out. It's a little, unless I'm missing something, it's a little iffy on exactly like what how the conflict starts. So basically, a war breaks out between the humans and the aliens. And then we get more backstory on Graydon about how he has a wife who's pregnant before. This is before he joined up, and he wants to join so he can set an example for his son and be on the right side of history. And now, if I'm missing or anything, you can definitely.
No, I think you've hit all the high spots. Yeah, no, you've
right.
It's
so
straightforward.
Yeah, so he's talking. So basically, he's kind of doing this narration. I guess what we find out is he's doing a narration for a video for his son, talking about why he joined the war, and he wants to unite the country and have a son grow up in a new nation, a new planet without fear or favor towards any species. And says people will read about this day for thousands of years, and you'll be able to tell everyone that was my dad, and he fought in the last war and brought us a future of unending peace. And we see that as Graydon himself is being killed by an alien. And then we got one last little splash panel of an alien father with an alien son. He's handing his son a little human skeleton. And it's a little confusing because the father says to the son, Graydon. And the son is saying, thick skull, thank you, father. So Al, I'm going to kick it over to you to kind of expound on this.
Well, the thing about science fiction, what science fiction is, it takes the present and it puts it into a different context that allows us to see the present in a broader perspective. And certainly this election was a question of two different roads. And I think when this was being worked on, the anticipation was that America would choose a particular road and not the one that it just chose. Not judging the choice, but it's the comic book it sees the alien force. It could be an alien politics or an alien culture. It's a terrific piece because it really understands how the alien suddenly, we make a deal with it. We come to terms with it. And the hero of the story, after resisting, there's a point where, all right, well, actually there's a couple of panels early in after he begins to turn. None of this blows over Graydon. This is our world now, says his wife. And he says, but we're going to get through it together. And the war started a month later, 42 humans and 5 aliens killed in a bombing at a unification event. Wartime expansion of detention centers was protected under executive immunity. Is what the narrator points out, which is quite literally what we have just walked into. And so the fact that the Graydon character suddenly, when things finally took a turn, I decided to be on the winning side of history. And then that panel, the Graydon character says, their cannons are out. They've got nothing but small arms. Let's keep pushing. We have them. And Graydon becomes one of them. One of us becomes one of them. And his reward is he gets killed anyway. It's a really well told, well written, the artwork is terrific, parable about how this thing attacks us from within. And we become the monster by our own choice.
Right. And it's interesting when they talk about the incident in the inciting events was this bombing at the unification event. But it doesn't really tell us or give any indication on whether it was human terrorists, whether it was alien terrorists, or whether it was like a deep state act. It doesn't really matter. Who was, I mean, it does matter who was behind it, but then the dominoes just are falling in the way that, you know, we all can see a mile away, but you can't stop it.
And it was always there at the start.
Mm-hmm. And then it took us a little discussion before the show to kind of parse out the last panel that basically is a flash forward. It doesn't really tell us that, but we think it's a flash forward that in a couple thousand years will just be the humans are just dust, the aliens have taken over, and they're kind of teaching their their children about, you know, fighting against tyranny, or, you know, it's kind of the history is repeating itself. Like there's never an end to the war. There's no last war.
It does. It goes on. It finds a way to self-perpetuate.
Right. It's just the cycle of human or intelligent being, I guess, in this manner. You know,
we are the seed of our own destruction.
Mm. Yeah,
it's a rather bleak story.
I know.
It would have been a lot less bleak if Kamala Harris had won.
Mm-hmm.
It would have felt, wow, look what we just avoided. But
there's people, but there's always going to be people who are going to feel the opposite, no matter who wins.
Indeed. You know, this is why comic book writing is so powerful.
Yes, storytelling.
It's a powerful message, regardless.
Yes. All right. Speaking of Seeds of Doom, we're gonna move to the next comic called Doomsday Particle. Sorry. And we have two scientists in the lab, and they're discovering a new trio of particles that have the power to basically. I'm just trying to find the place that says it. It's called the God particle, as the press puts it. Has the power to basically create a mini Big Bang, but is currently inert, so it's not harmful. But they want to try to find a way to try to harness the power. They say it contains the DNA of the entire universe. So two scientists on Earth in some facility, and they're retrieving the particles. But there's a third scientist, who's a woman who we find out is out in space. That's where the third particle is. So they sent her out there to get it. And then we see a conversation where they're saying that they're going to make the announcement about it in the next day. But the woman will take about 2 weeks to get back. She just kind of stuck out there for a bit. We see a newspaper about the announcement where the two scientists it says a pair of talented scientists win special prize. So again, they're kind of edging the woman out of the process. But they can tell that the particles contain unlimited energy, but they cannot figure out a way to activate it. And they make little comments that says, nothing seems to excite it. And then they turn to the woman and says, reminds me a little of you, Ross. And they go, haha, kidding. And she doesn't seem very happy. She ends up stealing one of the particles and going off to do her own research. There's another panel where one of the male scientists turns to the other and calls her a bitch. And then 3 months later, she invites the two scientists over to share her discovery, and says that in order to share it, she wants to be a partner with them. And they kind of laughing it off and saying, well, you show us and then we'll decide. And what she found out is that the particles are reactive to emotions, and especially human touch, and that they need to be respected in order to harness the power, so it doesn't run too wild, because obviously it's extremely powerful and it could be catastrophic. The two guys kind of laugh at her at this. One of them takes the particle and starts kind of mocking her, and eventually he kind of goes a little too far and he causes a massive explosion, which apparently destroys the whole continent, or at least like the whole coastal continental area, killing many people. They call it the Western US's oceans They call the Western U.S. Ocean history's largest graveyard. And in our last few panels, they say that the remaining God particles remain safely under lock and key at an undisclosed location to be studied by humans' best intellects and hopefully to be one day exploited. And we got a little panel where there's, it looks like a child of some sort or a young man is sneaking his way into the facility, and he's thinking about other scientists that called him an idiotic child. And he grabs one of the particles and says, "Look who's talking." And then kind of cuts off. All right, Alan.
Yet another bleak.
We're just going places with this one.
You know, there's just no saving mankind. If we're not arrogant one way, we're arrogant another way. Pride goeth before the fall, done it?
Yes, it does.
Another really terrifically well written. The artwork is terrific. The story flow, the use of color, and a really lovely piece of work, especially the last couple of panels as Earth gets wiped out, and the potency of these things, just the flow, the feeling of how these things, their potency flows, and yet another human being gets seduced by all that power.
Yeah, I love the artwork. The artwork in the first one was very good in a very traditional comic way.
Yeah.
This one is very much more impressionistic, which I really like too. I like both of them
super.
when they're done well. It's interesting towards the end we start seeing like all these plus signs or X's. They're not quite crosses, but they're not far off. And it kind of reminds me of old movies like Scarface that would have, lots of visual, not very at least us, not very subtle visual markers of something bad's about to happen, kind of like the orange in The Godfather, that kind of thing. And it's kind of talking about how science is fact-based. That's how we go about it, but you also need to consider more context as well and larger implications. Like facts needs to be met with consideration.
My dad was a surgeon, and he was very keenly aware when he was practicing. He's gone now, but that medicine, which we all want to assume is all science, was actually halfway science, but halfway art. Right. And the art part was the human beings, because in a lot of ways we defy science, or we stand outside sometimes science's ability to explain us, or our ability to explain what the science is doing to us. And so the art has to do with navigating us. And as we figure out the universe, it always reflects back on us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the very beginning, they mentioned they compare the two scientists to Oppenheimer and Hawking and Einstein, and who were, Oppenheimer was dealing with very dangerous particles that theoretically could have been very catastrophic.
What did Oppenheimer famously say as he witnessed the first atomic explosion? "I have become death, the destroyer of worlds." Right. That's what he said.
Yeah. So again, it's so these guys aren't really heeding that. You can tell they
have become death, the destroyer of worlds.
They are. Yeah, they come down without even thinking about it, thinking it'd be fun in a way, like the best, without any real respect for what they're doing of the technology or even their colleagues. Yeah, we're just really hitting all the fun spots today.
Yeah, we are. Jeez. Yeah. What was it Franklin said about keeping a republic? Well, yes, we've got a republic if we can keep it, but in order to keep it, it takes a little more discipline, and yeah.
All right. Our third segment is called Peer Review. We have some people on a spaceship who are looking for signs of life. They find something minuscule that they're not very happy about. So they're kind of complaining, like, "Yeah, we found something, but it doesn't seem much." When suddenly they are abducted by some other alien from, it seems like more of like a different dimension being, but they are saying that we come in peace. We are gathering people from all over the universe to commence to be in conversation with each other, to learn from each other, help each other advance. So they bring her basically to a it looks like a bar, like a cantina out of Star Wars or something like that. There's all these different aliens, and there's even like a very humanoid type of guy, and they're all kind of sharing technology. But she's again a little bit on the arrogant side. I don't really have much to learn from these people. They're all rather primitive compared to me. And then the aliens say, "Okay, we're gonna drop you off at your home." And then when they do that, turns out they say it's not our home. It's the planet has too much water. The moon has different atmosphere. So they end up crash landing into looks like Earth in the 1940s, some sort of military base. The woman comes out, but she's all burnt up and she's not able to communicate. So they shoot her dead. We find out that they are in Roswell, New Mexico. And they say, and then we kind of hear the army people saying that to keep this top secrets, tell the farmer it was a weather balloon. All right, Alan, go ahead.
Boy, science fiction. It does have a way of commenting on human beings. It asks a really cool question. What if the aliens that crash landed in Roswell came bringing a message of truly universal peace, and here's how to be part of it, and that's what we killed.
Mm-hmm.
And then we made up a bunch of shit to keep it a secret. Yeah, in a way, it kind of the twist at the end is that shoot first, ask questions later mentality. That sense of what exactly is intelligent life in the universe, and are we on Earth smart enough to recognize it? And the answer apparently is no.
No. Yeah, some of her dying thoughts are in the end, it didn't matter how amazing it was that I came from another world. These humans were as simple and unintelligent as the plankton I'd found on the icy moon.
True that.
Yeah. Well, I was a little confused at first. I was like, did they time travel back in time? Because again, they're presented as very human people. So again, we're thinking that they're human, but turns out they just happen to be humanoid from another planet.
Yes, yeah, and she's narrating it from the grave.
Right. And the aliens then the aliens abducted her, dropped them off at the wrong planet.
Yes, and that is the other cool twist to it, that she wasn't even supposed to be here. That they didn't take her back to her planet; they took her back here. And that was her misfortune.
No, humans, they all just look the same to them.
Indeed. Another really well-drawn piece. Really, The writing is strong. Everything about it is rock solid. Bravo.
Yeah, bravo. I love a good alien cantina. I don't know why. That's like a sci-fi. It's a Star Wars effect. But it's just such a fun, like,
yeah.
Okay, even aliens need to get a drink at a time. Like, that's the universal place that all species throughout the universe are going to hang out at.
Once George Lucas created that in Star Wars, it became as iconic as Rick's in Casablanca.
Yeah, well, yeah, exactly. And a place where everyone knows your name. Come on.
Exactly so. It really is that. It is a part of general storytelling understanding. We all know what this means.
Mm-hmm. Alan, maybe that should be a new series that we make, is Cheers, but in space.
There you go. Hey, we'll do it as a podcast first.
All right, and then we have a very short one to kind of finish us. Oh, it's just a 2-pager. It's called "The Hero of Venus." Anyway, so we have someone being elected president. Does it say president? I think. Yeah.
Yes. He Mike Milch becomes president.
Yes. Okay. So Mike Milch, he was a Army veteran who not only defended America but Earth by going to Venus and fighting the Venetians, which catapulted him into fame and power and election. And they said in the end, it wasn't even close. The new president got right to work conducting grand tour of bases and facilities and transmitting our nation's prized technological and military secrets back to Venusia, who had corrupted his blood and become his master, a real hero to his people. So basically, it's only a few panels. So we see him being elected, we see him touring the facility, we see him beaming information back, and we see a mothership over the Capitol, and then we see him being murdered by Venetian person.
Hawk person. Yeah, he's Hawk person. Yeah. It does. Once again, it doesn't end well for human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Because one human being screws the pooch.
Right, exactly. This one is fine. It's good, but I think because we already had one very similar to it, it's not as punchy. If this was in a different one more randomly, I think it would have a little bit more power.
It's a little like kicking us when we're down. Yeah. You kind of said this already. All right, we suck. We get it. Human beings are not worth the carbon they're printed on.
The flesh, as the collector says, not even worth the flesh are printed on.
Indeed, he might have something there.
Yeah, it's a great bit, but yeah, because it's already in one with a very similar, more fleshed out one, it kind of pales in comparison. So if it was in a different edition, I think it would have stand out a lot more. But again, great artwork, gets the story very economically. I appreciate that.
And hey, once again, the foreign corruption becoming, entering and really, and then one person or a couple of people, in this case, one person just betraying us outright.
Mm-hmm.
Corruption.
What's the phrase that like only a small group of people can change the world? Or why is it always a small group of people that change the world because they're the only ones that can?
Yeah, and it's often the worst who have the biggest impact. It can take a long time to build up a good thing, and moments to destroy it.
Yeah.
Whether it's a democracy or a building, a piece of art.
Yeah. Well, I feel compelled to apologize for being such bummers, but that's kind of where we are, and that's kind of where the comic took us. So we just took its lead. But Alan, give us some good news. Tell us something you got going on.
Well, I've my little company, Coster and Touchstone Productions, the makers of of How Not to Make a Movie podcast. We just got an investor, and we've got some people who believe in us and have put some cash behind us, and in 2025 we will begin we've got in addition to the How Not to Make a Movie podcast, we also have out in the marketplace now a podcast called The Donor Podcast, the DNA horror story, which you can find at thedonorpodcast.com. It's the absolutely true story of a friend of mine from the 1980s, worked his way through medical school as an anonymous sperm donor, jumped forward 25 years, a new company called 23andMe starts. He's a successful radiologist. He thinks, great, I'd love to know about my health genes. He sends in his DNA. Doesn't occur to him the ramifications of contributing your DNA to a growing DNA database, which is what that is, 23andMe and Ancestry, their DNA sections. And suddenly he lost his donor anonymity, and 7 total strangers found Daddy, except 6 of them had no idea that their actual biological father was a sperm donor. This is a story about technology run amok. Well, it's the technology is great, but there are ripple effects that that we need to attend to. That's what The Donor is about. It's 7 episodes. We've got a bunch of great new podcasts coming in the months ahead. We're going to drop a new one every month. We've got The Hall Closet will drop in December. Prisoner X will drop in January. There's just a lot of real cool stuff happening podcast wise.
And where can people follow you to find updates?
The best place, right? And we're in the process of creating the Costard and Touchstone hub, which will be the entry point to everything that we're doing. But really, either the How Not to Make a Movie podcast is always a great place to find, to find us, or the Donor podcast.
Yeah. You talk about the website, and you also
the website. Yeah. Right now, as stuff's happening very fast. And so, I'm doing it as fast as I can, the best I can. So yeah, it'll get easier and easier to find us in the weeks ahead, but it's the How Not to Make a Movie podcast. Yeah, that's a good place to start.
Okay. Well, Alan, thank you for coming on, and
thank you for having me, Jason. Always a pleasure.
All right. I appreciate everyone for listening. I'd really appreciate if you give us a rating and review on iTunes, a rating on Spotify, like and subscribe on YouTube, and you can follow us at Dads from the Crypt Talk on TikTok. And with that, we thank you for listening to Dads from the Crypt.
Follow Dads from the Crypt on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, or I will follow you to the grave. No, seriously, you really should watch. But be careful what you ask for. You may get it.